Hello everyone and welcome to my first woodworking video. Today I'll be building this wooden Red Sox logo. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and without further ado, let's get started. So to get started, we must first find a logo on Google Images. On this project, I just searched up Red Sox logo coloring page. Once you have found a logo that can easily be followed on a bandsaw or jigsaw, just save the image onto your PC. Next, go to File, right click on it without opening the image, hover your cursor over Open With, and then select Paint. This will then simply open the image in Microsoft Paint. So now go to File, hover your cursor over the arrow next to Print, then click Page Setup. In the bottom right corner, change the page scaling to 3x3 pages. This will stretch your image over 3x3 sheets of normal computer paper. Once you have done this, click OK, then File and print the pages. After all the pages have been printed and fully laid out on the floor, it is time to put them together. But before you do that, each page has about a 1/2 inch border around each side. This will all have to be cut off before you start taping the pages together. Once it has been cut off, carefully align the pages and tape them together using some Scotch tape. Make sure to use plenty of tape because it is frustrating if your pages fall apart when you go to pick them up later. Once they're all taped, double check the fit of the logo onto the wood circle just by feeling the edges, making sure that nothing hangs over. Once you are happy with the fit, we can now go to the shop and start painting and cutting. Before we get started on cutting out the logo, I'm going to sand and paint our wood circle just so it'll be nice and dry by the time we will need it. I just used some 120 grit sandpaper in my random orbit sander, and I just sanded the disc smooth. Then I'll just use some cheap paint I had lying around, and I applied 3 coats of it to make sure I fill in all the little voids and grain of the wood. While this is drying, it is now time to start cutting out the pieces, working from the outside, making your way towards the center of the logo. So now here I begin on cutting out the outer ring. It's pretty straightforward. I just took my time and followed the line all the way around. When I was done, it was all tuned up on the disc sander, and then I moved on to cutting the inner side of the ring using a jigsaw. After using the jigsaw, I tuned up the edges using various files and different grits of sandpaper. I think it came out looking pretty good. Now moving on to cutting out the inner ring and then beginning on the letters. It's the same exact procedure as before, and there's not really much to talk about from this point, so I'm just going to let you sit back and watch this section of the video. So here are all the letters after being cut out. In this next segment, you'll actually see me remove the paper from the letters. And the easiest way I found to do this was actually using starter fluid. I don't know what about it. Something dissolves the glue, I guess the alcohol in it, but whatever it is, it works beautifully. So that's just a little tip for you guys. So here I am once again doing some more filing and sanding to this project. And I just wanted to say, just because you guys see me using a bandsaw in this project, doesn't mean you need one. This project can easily be done using just a jigsaw or even just a scroll saw. Yeah, it may take a little longer and require more sanding and filing, but just because you don't have as many tools as someone else doesn't mean you should be discouraged to not go out and make something. There's a million different ways to make things and a million different tools to make those things, so sometimes you just gotta improvise and think outside the box. So now we finally move on to the painting phase of the project. The first thing I did was apply a few coats of spray primer to all the pieces, sanding in between coats, of course. The purpose of the primer is to fill in the grain of the plywood, because I do find this plywood to have kind of an open grain. So the goal for the final outcome of all these pieces is to have a nice smooth finish to it. If I were to do this project again, I would definitely use MDF, not plywood. I think the only reason why I chose plywood was because it was a little cheaper than MDF. But of course there is an extra step and you do have to prime it. If I went with MDF straight away, I most likely would not have had to prime it. It's smooth enough, it paints really easily. So if anyone out there is going to tackle this project, I would definitely use 1/2 inch MDF rather than the sanded plywood that I used. Not only is it easier to work with, but you won't get any chipping or splintering from MDF as you do with plywood, especially if you're using a scroll saw or a jigsaw for this project. I was lucky enough to have a bandsaw, so I didn't get too much chipping out of the plywood. MDF is also easier to sand, but the only downside is it can be very dusty. So if you are using MDF, be sure to wear some sort of respirator, because MDF definitely gets really dusty really quickly when you cut into it. So the primer and red spray paint all came out of a can. Anytime I can't find a specific color that I need out of a can, I'll actually have my local Home Depot mix the paint color that I need. For projects like this, I don't need that much paint, so I just buy the sample cans. I think they're a pint, and once again I prime the piece and then I brush on a couple coats of that paint, and it looks pretty good at the end. I'll put a picture of the brand of the paint and the color, so if you guys are interested in making this project, you'll know the exact color that I used. Again, I did buy this from Home Depot. All of the pieces came from Home Depot, the wood, the paint, pretty much everything. So now you'll start to see me mask the front of the letters, and then I'll paint the edges of the letters with the blue paint. This specific masking tape, to be honest, it was cheap. The paint did bleed through, so I had to go over with the red one more time off camera. So if you are thinking of, again, tackling this project, I would just paint the blue straight on, not even mask it. Just be careful to not get on the front. If you do, it's really no big deal. Try to scrape it off, try to wipe it off, and if you have to, just spray a red right over it, being careful of the edges. Now that all the painting is done, it is now time to start assembly. First, I laid out the pieces on the circle, drew a few reference lines with a pencil, and then drilled holes so I can screw each piece in from the back. Any smaller, thinner pieces that I couldn't have used screws on were all glued using super glue. In this case, wood glue would not have worked since I was trying to glue two painted surfaces together. The super glue was also used as a clamp to hold the pieces still as I was screwing them in through the back. I definitely took my time in this stage of the project because I knew if I messed something up, it would definitely bother me. So always take your time and do it right the first time around. The stitches were so small and delicate that I used needle nose pliers to set them in. And after everything was put together, I gave the entire sign a coat of spray lacquer. I gotta say, this is probably one of my best signs I've done in a while. I think it turned out great, and the time and detail put into this was completely worth the effort. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you for watching my first video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.